Grieve the loss to quit porn. I'm Dr. Trish Leigh. Thanks for joining me in this video so I can share with you how grief and loss is part of the transformational journey when, first of all, you figure out that porn is not serving you, and then secondly, you develop the courage to be able to get on the transformational journey from where you are to where you want to be. All right, in this video, there's actually going to be 4 points. I know what you're thinking. That's new? Yes, it is. Well, first we're going to talk about this transformational journey and how grief and loss is part of it. Number 2, we're going to then talk about what am I talking about in grief and loss. We're going to talk about loss, longing, and feeling lost as part of grief. And then when we wrap that up, we're going to move into types of complicated grief, including disenfranchised grief, which is what most people feel when they decide to quit porn and get on the transformational journey. Then, of course, number 4 is your brain hack for the day. I'm going to give you the tools that you need to deal with the loss, deal with the grief, incorporate it into your life, honor it, and move on to become the best, most authentic version of yourself. I'm totally psyched. So let's dig in. Okay, number 1, transformational journey. When you figure out porn's not serving you and you decide that you're going to leave it behind, it may not be as easy as that may seem to be able to accomplish establishing a new lifestyle without porn. And that's really what you need to do. And along with getting rid of the old lifestyle that you may have been wrapped up in for a long time, you approach a new lifestyle with the loss of that old version of yourself. And I like to think of it as the self that you've been has needed porn for self-soothing and has needed to escape your life for some reason. It's either pain or discomfort from the past, or pain or discomfort from the present, from stress, from unresolved issues that make it so that you can't create the future that you want. That's your little self with a small s at the beginning. This transformational journey is going to take that little s self and grow it up through increased emotional maturity to the big S, the big self, your true authentic self, the one that is in there, that doesn't need porn to self-soothe because life is so good. So involved in that is going from where you were to where you want to be. That will require transformation from the old version of yourself that you've been for a very long time, which has included porn use, to the new version of yourself that doesn't include porn use, but needs to include some new things so that you have a new identity, the one that you want to be, has integrity and dignity, the one that gets rid of guilt and shame and no longer needs to go back into the screen. So with that transformation comes change. With change often comes grief and loss. Loss of that old version of yourself and loss of porn. Porn has probably served you really, really well for the last couple years, the last couple decades. If it hasn't served you, you wouldn't still be doing it. And it may have turned on you. Don't get me wrong, and we can talk about that later. But the point is, it has served you. So grieving is dealing with that loss and moving on. And the grief many times needs to be witnessed. This is what David Kessler, a grief researcher, has come up with. He says that there's a common thread with grief, is that people want their grief and their loss to be witnessed by other people so that they can process it. So let's dig into what is this loss and this transformational journey. In Brene Brown's new book, Atlas of the Heart, such a good book, she talks about a researcher called Robert Niemeyer. He is one of the prolific researchers in the area of grief, and she's integrated his work and made it her own and has come up with 3 aspects of loss and longing and feeling loss that becomes part of grief and how we can use grief to help us move through it. Okay, so let's break it down. What am I talking about? What is loss? Loss is when you decide that you are going to quit porn. There's going to be a change in your routine. Your normal isn't normal anymore. You have to come up with a new normal. So you grieve the loss and you feel the loss of the old normal as you knew it. You grieve and you feel the loss of what you had, or what you thought you had at least. So for so many people that I work with, they thought they had a harmless habit that they could just go to relax. And when they find out that that habit is damaging their brain and it's making it so that they're not on purpose in their life, that feeling of lack or of being unmotivated in their life, when they trace that back to porn use, first of all, they're blown away. And secondly, then they have to grieve the loss of that harmless habit that they had to relax at the end of the night. And so that may be the loss that you're going through. We're also talking about other losses when we talk about porn use, because so many people use porn because of losses that they have experienced or grief they have experienced in the past. So we know one big complicated grief is any type of abuse. And we know many times abuse and neglect and dysfunction is a driving force for a porn habit. So you might be grieving the loss of the relationship you thought you had, or the parent you thought you had, or the life you thought you had, due to some grief or some trauma that has happened in your past. So also don't forget that that could be one thing that you need to process on top of losing porn as a habit in your life. Okay, so let's go on to number 2, is longing. And if you've been trying to quit porn for any amount of time, and especially if you've not been fully successful, you know what this longing feels like. Longing is the involuntary yearning for wholeness. You want to feel whole again. Now, porn has filled some of the holes in your psyche in a very unhealthy way. But when you take porn away, those holes are there again, and they're not being filled artificially by porn, which means it's time to fill them in a healthy way. That longing for porn is a longing and a yearning for the wholeness that you want to feel inside. So when we transform from little self to big S, authentic self, the goal is to fill those holes in a healthy way, resolve the trauma from the past, move through the grieving process, feel the loss, feel the longing for the relationship that you lost in the past, feel the longing for the love from your parent. And we're going to talk about how you can honor it, but then create it in your own life. And we're getting there. It's also an understanding that you're looking for meaning. So this longing feeling might be, now I don't use porn anymore, but now the meaning of my life is up there. It's like I used to do this habit and it was part of me for so long, and now the meaning of what I stand for and how I move through the world has changed. It's transforming. Of course, we're improving it, but at the same time, there's a loss there and a longing just to get back to homeostasis. Your brain will fight to get back to what you knew. While you're in the midst of trying to create something new, it wants to go back to what you did know in the past. And that creates difficulties in adaptation. And that creates disenfranchised grief that we'll talk about in just a few minutes. But that longing, you're trying to regain or simply touch again the feelings that porn gave you when you were using porn in the past. And you can't find anything in your new world that makes you feel as good as porn. And you feel this longing for it and this sense of loss for it, which leads to the feeling of feeling lost with a T at the end, not knowing where to go. Difficulty in reorienting every single part of your life, the emotional part of your life, the physical part of your life, and especially the social part of your life. All of it feels like you're lost. You have to now recreate it in a new way. You have to reaffirm who you are and set out on the journey to become the new version of yourself while trying to deal with this loss and longing and feeling of being lost. And that's what we're going to talk about here, is that when you move through this process, the more easily and more direct the journey is, the easier it can be for you. But disenfranchised grief leads to the flip-flopping and the back and forth and the up and down and the committed to the new you and wanting to go back to the old you. So let's segue to that. After, let me just put a bow on that. Let me button it up for a second. So first there's loss, feeling the loss of not having porn anymore. Then there's longing for that time that you had with porn to make your brain feel good and to help you escape from the past or the present that's giving you discomfort. And there's the feeling of being lost, not knowing where to go because this is new terrain and new territory for you. That is grief in a nutshell. And disenfranchised grief is more difficult than acute grief. Acute grief is somebody dies and you're feeling the pain and the pang of that loss in the moment, which then can lead to more complicated grief over time, where you integrate those feelings of loss and longing and feeling lost, but now you learn how to recreate the new you. In disenfranchised grief, it becomes really difficult to create the new you because you don't know what that looks like. And many times you need a professional to show you how to create the new version of yourself. In Brené's Brown book, she says, if you're dealing with complicated grief and if it has this level of disenfranchisement, get a professional to help you move through. Because when you get stuck in disenfranchised grief, you can be stuck there forever. If you've ever met people who have told you, especially when it comes to porn use, that I've been quitting porn for 40 years. Nobody should have to be in a place where you're quitting something for, half a century. Don't do that to yourself. Get professional help to move you through as efficiently as possible. That's why I offer programs, because sometimes the road isn't as clear as it should be for someone who's dealing with this disenfranchised grief. Okay, so that's number one and number two that we're talking about. Let's move on and we'll talk a little bit more about this disenfranchised grief, which is number three in our bulleted points today. So, what is disenfranchised grief? It is invisible. It's much more complicated than the pangs of hurt that are happening in the moment. It's very difficult to put your thumb on. And it goes back to loss, longing, and feeling lost, but not really being able to identify where that's coming from. And there's something called magical thinking. And there's a really great book by Joan Didion, The Year of Magical Thinking, where she talks about that book literally blew my mind because I didn't know the concept of magical thinking before I read the book. I devoured it. I couldn't get up from reading it. It's one of those books. And in the book, she talks about how her husband died suddenly and she couldn't believe he was gone. And she literally went into this other place, a dissociative type of place of thinking he was going to come back. And that's what magical thinking is. So many people get stuck in that place when it comes to quitting porn because you think you can quit porn, but go back every once in a while. And so that will lengthen the amount of time, this magical thinking where you're like, I'm going to give it up mainly, but if I want to watch it once a month or once every 6 months, I'll be able to do that. But you'll quickly find that porn addiction is real. And when it comes to addiction, you can't go back every 6 months because it's a slippery slope that leads you right back to where you were 6 months ago. So it does have an all or none phenomena to it. And that is the magical thinking that may happen in disenfranchised grief. And when you do that, it becomes very difficult to adapt to the new version of yourself. And it can make recovery a lifetime of recovery, which is not good for you and it's not good for your brain, and it keeps you in this struggle survival mode for longer than you need to. What I want is to get you to the other side of that so we can move you on to thrival, as I've been calling it lately, thrive mode in your brain. Okay, so how are we going to do that? Number 4, your brain hack for the day. These are the steps to be able to process grief and move through loss, longing, and feeling lost. First of all, I've said it a whole bunch of times. These are feelings. These are not thoughts. When it comes to porn use, we know you escape into porn to avoid uncomfortable feelings. When it comes to grief, that's uncomfortable feelings. And man, do I know how hard those feelings can be, how much they hurt. And I know what I've learned in my own journey is that I've learned to sit with those feelings. A feeling only lasts 90 seconds. After that, you're recreating it. So what I've learned through my ability to attempt, and I'm doing pretty great, but it's still an attempt to process grief and to honor that grief and get to the other side of it and incorporate it into my life so that I feel whole, even though I do carry grief around with me. What happens there is within 90 seconds, I feel that. And I'll be honest with you, I've spent days feeling that. But then the next day, I can honor the grief that I have and still get back to business. But you have to feel the feelings. And the last time this happened to me, no joke, I spent the entire day crying, which I'm not a crier. And my kids would come out and they go, oh, and they would give me a hug because they knew it's the one day a year feeling something, and something had happened and I allowed myself to feel it. I literally took a bath for like 3 hours, just feeling sad and allowing those feelings to move through me so that I could process and integrate them, thinking about what led me to the place where I was at, thinking about the person that I was grieving and that I was missing in my life, and trying to adapt to the loss of that person. And then the next day I got up and I wasn't pretending things were okay. I was integrating that loss into my life and moving forward, feeling happy, even though I have a little part of me that has sadness tucked in. And we know from the research that feeling sad is so important, and being able to acknowledge that you're sad and being able to live with some element of sadness is an important thing, an important skill to build. That's what that grows up that little s into the big S, so you can become your big authentic self, because you can become stronger every time you have to deal with grief. All right, so moving forward, talking about it. Talking about your grief to someone, like going back to what David Kessler said, is that having somebody witness your grief and making it real. That's why porn recovery groups are so important. In my program, we have group coaching that I run, and in the group, we talk about the difficulties in leaving porn behind. We talk about the losses. People get sad, they get mad, they process, they integrate, they come back. We do it with each other in a safe, closed environment of people who relate and are in the same place as you, but with an emotionally mature professional to be able to navigate the road ahead. That's how you can talk about it. So you don't have to join my group, but I encourage you to join a group, because that's how you can process out loud and have your pain and your grief witnessed. It's amazing. I've been to groups myself to be able to move through the difficult things in my past. In the past, I've gone and I continue to show back up and work with people for my own stuff so that I can continue to move forward and evolve, because I'm engaging and approaching the discomfort and the pain instead of ignoring it and escaping into porn. Okay, so then the last piece of how we integrate this brain hack for the day, is recreating yourself and becoming the new version of yourself by doing what needs to be done. Action. So first you're going to feel the feels, feel that discomfort. Then you're going to act in a new way. And I'm going to give you a very powerful step right now. Get your journal out, and I want you to write 2 columns. On the left-hand column, write down all the characteristics of the old version of your little self. So write self with a small s, self, in the left-hand column. In the right-hand column, draw a line. In the right-hand column, draw a big S, self. So you're on a transformational journey from your little self, the one who's been self-sabotaging himself on accident using porn, and you're becoming your big, authentic, true self with a capital S. Write down all the characteristics of your little self, all the things that you have done in the past that you've needed, the good things and the things that are seemingly bad or are not serving you anymore. So porn, watch porn, drinking, drugs, anger, irritability, road rage, maybe your favorite sport. That's a good thing. Maybe it's being a great dad. Maybe it's being a good partner. Maybe it's being a lousy partner. Write down all the characteristics of your old self. Now, write down all the characteristics that you want to create in your new big S self. Integrity, dignity. You want to make more money. You want a new job. You want to do the hobbies you've always loved to do and get better at them. You want to show up and be a great partner for your partner. You want to be the number one in sales. You want to be the best football player. Write down all the characteristics that your big self will be, and then create the action steps to take you from little self to big self. The action steps are in all of my videos here on YouTube, here online. If you need more help, the specific action steps from little s to big S, big self, are in my 90-day program. That's why I have it. In 90 days, it doesn't mean you complete the transformational journey in 90 days, even though some people do. The journey is you start as your little self, and across the 90 days, you learn the tools to figure out who your big self is. Then you're able to implement them. And if you start implementing them, you become that version, and you create integrity and dignity, and you no longer have shame, you no longer have guilt, and you become the version of yourself that you've always wanted to be that doesn't need porn. That's what this journey is about, but there's grief associated with it. So feel the feels, feel the grief. Sit there and go, WTF, I don't even know what to do right now because normally I'd be watching porn. Then do something else. Go play badminton, go play checkers, go do something else that's important to you so you become the guy who relaxes by playing chess, not relaxes by watching porn. Action steps moving forward. All right, I hope that helps you out. And if you're looking for help on the journey, my 90-day program has the tools to take you from your small self to your big self. And I'd love to be part of that journey. So reach out to me, drtrishleigh.com. And as always, control your brain or it'll control you.